those variants of concern that could have an impact on the spread of the disease and the protection conferred by the vaccines. In particular, the variant called BA.2.75 that is currently spreading in India needs to be carefully monitored. Coming to the recent recommendations, 2 new safe and effective adaptive vaccines have been added to the portfolio of vaccines available in the European Union. Adaptive vaccines are designed to present our immune system with different strains of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in order to expand the immune response, especially towards strains that have been circulating recently. Our Human Medicine Committee, the CHMP, has concluded the evaluation of the first 2 adaptive vaccines, which are called Comirnaty Original/Omicron BA.1 and Spikevax Bivalent Original/Omicron BA.1. Both can be used to revaccinate people from 12 years of age who have had their first 2 shots of primary vaccination. The 2 adaptive vaccines are authorized for revaccination regardless of the vaccine people have received previously. The 2 newly approved adaptive vaccines contain messenger RNA sequences which trigger the production of spike proteins from the original strain and the Omicron BA.1 subvariant. The study submitted in support of the 2 positive opinions were designed to determine whether the safety profile of the adaptive vaccine indicates any difference with the original vaccine, as well as their ability to stimulate an immune response against Omicron variants. The data we have evaluated confirm that vaccines have a similar safety profile as the original ones. Also, the data are showing that both vaccines trigger strong immune responses against the Omicron BA.1 and the original virus in people previously vaccinated. In particular, they were more effective at triggering immune responses against the BA.1 subvariant than the original vaccines. The preliminary data are also indicating that the antibodies generated by these adaptive vaccines have the ability to neutralize other Omicron subvariants, including BA.1, BA.2.75, the one that is circulating in India, and importantly, BA.5. In fact, we have seen so far that all Omicron and Beta variant adaptive vaccines are showing an improvement of the immune response towards Omicron strains that have been circulating recently, no matter which variant of concern has been incorporated in the vaccine. However, it is underlined that only data generated in the real-life setting will be able to assess to what extent this improvement in the immune response will translate into protection from infection and disease. We are currently working with ECDC to outline our considerations on how the adaptive vaccine should be used for revaccination. A joint statement is planned for early next week. I want to use the opportunity here to highlight the difference between the regulatory authorization, which establishes the quality, safety, and efficacy of a vaccine, and public health advice on the use of a vaccine, which strives to maximize its potential to protect people, taking into account parameters such as infection rates, hospital capacity, vulnerable populations, and availability. The approved indication for the adaptive vaccines covers a very broad population. However, similarly to what's said in the past jointly with the ECDC, at this stage the priority should be to revaccinate individuals in at-risk categories such as the elderly, people with underlying medical conditions, people who are at risk of severe COVID-19, those who are immunocompromised, pregnant women, and healthcare workers. This approach is in line with the principles that guide vaccination campaigns for seasonal influenza. The population that should receive an adaptive vaccine as a booster might be then expanded over time. Similarly, while the EU product information of the adaptive vaccines allows revaccinations after a minimum of 3 months, it would be expected that member states consider intervals longer than 4 months after the last vaccine dose or confirm natural exposure to the virus when using these adaptive vaccines in the upcoming vaccination campaigns. Adaptive vaccines incorporating the Omicron subvariant BA.4 and 5 are currently under review by the EMA or will be submitted soon. We are indeed evaluating an application for a bivalent Comirnaty vaccine with messenger RNA strands that are targeting both the original SARS-CoV-2 and Omicron subvariants BA.4/5. The outcome of this review is expected by mid-September. Discussions are also ongoing with Moderna in preparation for an application for a bivalent BA.4/5 vaccine, which we expect to also receive this month. The BA.4/5 adaptive vaccines are nearly identical to the BA.1 adaptive vaccines in terms of their composition. The assessment of the application for a BA.4/5 adaptive vaccine will be based on the clinical safety and immunogenicity data already evaluated for the BA.1 adaptive vaccines and other investigational vaccines incorporating other variants such as Beta or Delta. And also the preclinical data with the BA.4/5 vaccine will provide supportive evidence. Based on several decades of experience with influenza vaccines, it has been demonstrated that minor changes introduced in the vaccines are not changing the safety profile or the immune response can be then predicted. If authorized, these booster vaccines will further extend the arsenal of available options that can be used by member states in their revaccination campaigns. While the adaptive vaccines are an important new tool, we must not lose sight of the fact that the original COVID-19 vaccines are still able to protect against severe COVID-19 disease and death. They have retained their ability also against the currently dominating Omicron strains, even if they are less effective in preventing infection and symptomatic disease. With a virus that is evolving quickly, it is not possible to predict which variants will be circulating this autumn and winter. It is not excluded that new emerging variants later this year may be closer to BA.2 than BA.5, or there might be a completely new variant emerging that we are not able to predict today. Therefore, the EU strategy is to have a broad range of updated vaccines so member states have a plurality of options to meet their needs when they design their vaccination strategies. Concretely, this means that our arsenal of vaccines will include the original vaccines based on different platform and technologies, as well as the new adaptive ones with different strain composition. Let me address the question that many of you are probably pondering. So, which vaccine or booster should I take? Putting it in simple terms, if you are not vaccinated at all, you will be offered one of the original vaccines. They will protect you against severe disease, hospitalization, and death. And if you meet then the criteria for revaccination, we understand that member states are making preparation to offer you an adaptive vaccine. The already approved adaptive vaccines, as well as the upcoming one, if approved, are all expected to expand the immunity against variants of concern, especially Omicron and related sublineages, no matter which variant of concern has been incorporated in the vaccine. Therefore, it is important to take the adaptive vaccine that is made available to you and not to delay. There is no need to wait for another adaptive vaccine. Our message is to trust the decisions taken by your national health authority. They will best suit your needs and will take into account all the relevant criteria such as your vaccination status and your health records. You should not wait for a specific vaccine. Our experience with COVID-19 so far has shown that timely rollout and focus on vulnerable groups has been more important in the success of vaccination campaigns than the use of one vaccine over another. Current monovalent vaccine based on the original strain should be used in case adaptive vaccines are not yet available. Our work on COVID does not stop with the adaptive vaccines. The evaluation of Comirnaty for use in children from 6 months to 4 years is progressing, as well as the review for the authorization of Spikevax in the 5 months to 6 years range. For the messenger RNA vaccines, we are also advancing with the evaluation of the respective boosters for the pediatric population. The agency is putting a lot of effort in evaluating all the available data in order to gradually expand the authorization of vaccines to all pediatric populations. Yesterday, the CHMP recommended also the approval of the Nuvaxovid booster, which can be used either as an homologous, so after primary vaccination with Nuvaxovid, or heterologous booster, so after primary vaccination with a messenger RNA or an adenovector vaccine. And this booster dose is based on the original strain. In terms of vaccine candidates, the evaluation of the marketing authorization is progressing for Vitprevtin and Skycovion, and the rolling review is ongoing for the vaccine developed by EPRA. We will keep you updated on any of these developments. Moving to therapeutics, the ETF started reviewing data on the use of sabizabulin for the treatment of COVID-19. This molecule is expected to have a role in inhibiting the replication of the virus, and it has also anti-inflammatory properties. At this stage, the company that is developing sabizabulin has not applied for a formal marketing authorization, but the ETF is reviewing the data from a pivotal clinical study in order to support EU member states who may consider using this medicine before a possible authorization. And this is following a request from Germany. This is a clear example of the new responsibilities that the extension of EMA's mandate confer to the ETF and will help ensure a consistent approach in the EU. Recently, we have seen also the results of a study taking into account the real-life use in Israel of the oral antiviral Paxlovid during the latest Omicron surge, and the data are showing that this antiviral therapy has had a significant beneficial impact on hospitalization and mortality due to COVID in patients 65 years of age or older. We understand there are still some difficulties in EU member states in allowing prompt use of this antiviral in the community in infected patients at higher risk of progression to severe disease. And we will be working with the member states to identify actions that can foster the timely and effective access of this antiviral. Now, moving to monkeypox. The ETF has been very active in the response to the monkeypox outbreak. You might have seen that the task force endorsement of the intradermal use of the Imvanex vaccine as a temporary measure to deal with the limited supply of this vaccine. When Imvanex is used as an intradermal injection just below the top layer of your skin, rather than subcutaneously as it is in the authorized product information, a smaller dose of the vaccine can be used, which means that more people can be vaccinated. However, there is also a high risk of local reactions after intradermal injection. Also, there is no information available whether 5 0.1 ml doses can be consistently withdrawn from the authorized presentation, which consists of 0.5 ml suspension. Administer intradermal injections correctly is complex, and only healthcare professionals with experience should administer the vaccine this way. In view of the need to protect people at risk and given the still limited supply, the ETF considered that the risks were outweighed by the benefits of achieving broader coverage. The ETF has already been facilitating the conduct of large multinational trials in the EU on the use of the antiviral tecovirimat, which is authorized to treat monkeypox, as you know, and the vaccine Imvanex. And it is now reviewing the trial protocols and liaising with national regulatory bodies to coordinate and facilitate the approval of clinical trial applications. The ETF is looking into designing study for the use of the vaccine for pre- and post-exposure prophylaxis in the European Union. Tecovirimat should also be available shortly in the European countries in larger quantities after a joint procurement procedures led by our colleagues at HERA. We are working to collect robust clinical evidence on its clinical efficacy in mild, moderate, and severe monkeypox infection. ETF is also looking into engaging with developers of new vaccines for monkeypox, and we encourage developers of novel antivirals and vaccines to contact the EMA so to get support for streamlined development. Thank you for your attention. I will stop here and give the floor back to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco Cavalieri, and we will now take questions from the floor. As usual, please turn on your camera if you want to ask a question and raise your hand in WebEx. And when I give you the floor, we will unmute your microphone and you can then ask your question. So the first question today is coming from Helen Collis from Politico. Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much, and nice to see you all. The European Commission issued a communication this morning to member states urging them to prepare for the coming winter regarding the pandemic and other respiratory viruses. In that communication, it's urged countries to plan coordinated and consistent vaccination strategies across countries And it lists a number of other vaccines that are coming in the pipeline that will also be targeting other variants such as alpha and beta. And it also talks about sort of older technologies in vaccines, which might be more preferred by some people who haven't yet had vaccination. I'm wondering, given what you've said today, Marco Cavalieri, on that it is important not to delay taking any vaccine that's offered to you, how can we sort of marry up this consistent approach across the bloc when we've got so many different vaccines coming? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Marco, please.
I think, as said, all vaccines that are authorized are good vaccines, depending on the use, whether for primary series or for additional boosters. And that's what we are consistently stating here. And this is no different than other things like influenza, when there are different brands and different type of vaccines that are offered every year. And there might be differences at national level on which vaccine will be used based on a number of factors, as said. So what we are trying to say is that all vaccines are good, all can be used, and with the CDC we will try to come up with a joint position so that to state how we think the new adaptive vaccine should be used in terms of priority groups, and we hope that this will help in having a consistent approach across European member states.
Thank you very much. Astonishingly, I do not see any additional questions. That's your chance. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Yes, Ian Schofield. Ian, the floor is yours.
Hi, hi Marco. Thanks for the presentation. I've got one question. The US CDC panel has just voted to recommend the use of the bivalent booster vaccines targeting BA.4 and BA.5. And you mentioned that the EMA is also assessing one of these vaccines against the newer subvariants. Is there currently any evidence that vaccines against BA.4 and BA.5 will be any more effective than the existing boosters? One recent study has suggested that the important thing is to have a booster of any kind rather than one targeted against a specific subvariant.
Thanks, Ian. So that question is about the effectiveness of the different adapted vaccines. Marco, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. And the simple question is that we don't have a lot of evidence here. So it's very much unclear what could be the advantages of a BA.4/5 vaccine over a BA.1, except some obvious statement. First of all, if BA.5 is still in circulation, it is expected that a vaccine that is clearly matching what is out there will confer a good immune response. But whether this will be superior to a BA.1 vaccine, we simply don't know at this stage. All we've seen are some mice data that would indicate that a BA.4/5 vaccine give really a broad immune response, particularly as primary series, but no major differences when it comes to booster doses. And we got some data on natural infection, like from South Africa, that would indicate that, or would confirm that indeed in people non-vaccinated, BA.4/5 give a broader breadth of immunity. But again, also here, it looks like people already vaccinated, this difference seems to be disappearing. So it will be very interesting to see in real-world evidence and vaccine effectiveness studies whether there will be differences and how big these differences are going to be, because we don't see really any clear signal that there are differences that we can say today.
Thank you very much. We now have a question from Bloomberg, from Dong Liu. Dong Liu, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you. I have a question about the Monkey Pox vaccine. There was a study from Netherlands late yesterday showing that the 2 doses of the Genos or EMA vaccine generated relatively low levels of Monkey Pox antibodies, and if the vaccine was administered at a lower dose intradermally, the antibody generated is even lower. This is, of course, by no means a final verdict on the effectiveness of the vaccine against monkeypox, but are you concerned with this study findings, and how will that in any way change your recommendation for intradermal administration for the monkeypox vaccine? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that question is about the antibody creation of Imvanex and whether we are concerned about the latest studies. Marco, please.
Yeah, I think we will have to scrutinize all this data and these studies to really understand what is their impact and what exactly they are telling us. And based on this review, we will see if there is any opportunity to amend our recommendation. I have to reiterate that the study conducted, so the rigorous study conducted comparing a subcutaneous dose of Imvanex with 1/5 of the dose by intradermal administration, they are pretty convincing in showing that the level of immunogenicity is the same. So in other words, the study confirmed that there were no differences. Now we will have to see what the study is telling us and what could be, the consequences in terms of our recommendation. It is simply too early to say.
Thanks a lot. The next question is coming from Ulrike Till from German Radio. Ulrike, over to you.
Hi there. I've got a question regarding the new vaccines for COVID. As a lot of my colleagues, I'm really surprised why is the original strain still part of the mix? Because the data I've seen so far, the monovalent vaccines were much better in protecting against BA.1 and probably also BA.5. So is anybody seriously expecting that if the virus mutates, it might go back towards the original strain? Or why don't we have a pure Omicron booster inside? Thank you.
Thanks, Ulrike. So the question is about monovalent versus bivalent vaccines. Marco, I think another question for you.
Yeah, I think this is an important question, and we debated a lot also with international regulators and with the scientific community. The concept here is that having also still included the one strain helps in maintaining, the breadth of immunity as large as possible, since Omicron and the original one strain are so very much far away one to the other in immunological terms. It will give us a little bit of a reassurance that if something comes up that is completely different from Omicron, there is something in the vaccine that will provide additional boosting. So that was the first consideration. The second one is that if we think that in the future we want to kind of restrict the amount of different composition of vaccines and formulations available, probably a bivalent vaccine could also be a good starting point to think about vaccines to be used as a primary series. So that also is an important consideration that was factored in when we had a bit of a consensus here with other regulators that a bivalent vaccine for the time being was the best option. Of course, we will be happy to revisit this once we learn more about the performance of this vaccine and see what could be the best way forward for the future.
Thank you very much. And I'll see that Helen from Politico has a follow-up question. Helen, please go ahead.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier, Marco, that the BA.4/5 targeted mRNA vaccines will be getting a quicker assessment in a model similar to the flu vaccines. I'm wondering if other types of vaccine technologies will also undergo this speedier assessment if they are also adapted to forthcoming variants.
Thanks a lot. This question is about, the assessment, the speed of the assessment, whether that's only for the mRNA vaccines. Marco, again.
Yeah, I think here indeed influenza is the only situation in which the virus is constantly changing, and we have learned that we need to adapt the vaccine very rapidly in order to match as best as possible the variants that are in circulation. For other pathogens, other infectious diseases, the situation is very different, at least so far, and therefore we have not been exposed to a situation by which we had to constantly change the composition of the vaccines over time in order to match how the virus is evolving. I believe this is clearly a feature for respiratory viruses, and it really looks like, at least for the time being, SARS-CoV-2 will fall into this category, and we will need, as has been already demonstrated, we need to think how to improve the immunity of the vaccine in order to be closer to what is in circulation.
Thank you very much. So far, I do not see any additional questions. So last chance, if anyone still has a concern, a question they want to have clarified. Otherwise, I'm closing this press briefing. So thank you very much for your participation today, and a big thank you to my colleagues who stood ready to respond to your questions. Please note that for the time being, we are going to continue to hold these briefings once per month, and we are going to send you an invite to the next briefing in the coming weeks. And as always, if you have any follow-up questions or you want further feedback, please do not hesitate to follow up with the press office. Thanks again for today, and goodbye.